Hi friends, it's Chari, and today I have a fun platform pop-up congratulations card to share with you using some of the new products from the Valentine release. I am using the Porcupine for You stamp set with those cute little porcupines and some of the other little mushrooms and snail images. I will be using Happy Wedding for the wedding cake. I will also end up using those little hearts. And I will be using Bicycle Built for You for the veil and the top hat for my little happy couple. I decided to color my porcupines in two different browns. So for this one on the right, I'm using those E70s. I'm starting with the darkest color out towards the edges, then I'm blending in with that middle color, which is that E74, and then I'll blend into the lightest color in the center. I do have that piece of coffee table, knock on wood pattern paper up there in the corner. I'll be using this for the base of my platform pop-up to make it look like a big tree stump for my little scene to sit on. So I just pulled that in so I can see that color and make sure I use some colors that match pretty well. Now for the bodies of the porcupine, I will be coloring them both the same using that E11 first, and then I'm pulling in another light brown, kind of yellowy color, that YR01, just for some darker shadows. And then I'll just blend out with that E11 again. I'm doing the same colors for this porcupine on the left, but the quills on this one will be some different browns so that they don't look exactly the same and they look a little different. Now for the quills on my second porcupine, I decided to use some warm grays for a different look. So I'm starting out with a W5 out on the edges, and then I am pulling that in with a W3. So that is my lighter shade. I did grab my W4, which is in between those two, to try to darken it up a little bit, but there is not a big difference, so it really just kind of mellowed out the color. So I went back with that W5 and added some darkness again. Then I got my W7 and went over those quills. So I did the same thing on the one on the right as well. With the darkest shade, I just traced those little detail lines in the porcupine quills. Now I'm adding a little dark nose to each of them. And then I also have my R20, so I'm adding some rosy cheeks, and then I'll color the inside of their ear. For the cake, I am starting by coloring those little hearts with the R22, which is one of my favorite pinks to use. I'm also using that for some of the flowers on the veil as well. Now I have a purple, that V12, and I'm coloring the little buntings between the hearts on the top tier with the purple, and then I'm using a green color for the buntings on the bottom tier. My wedding colors were purple and green just like this as well, so I think this is a really fun way to kind of customize the card to the couple that you're giving it to. Now for the veil, I used some cool grays, but I decided I wanted a little bit of a warm tone, so I pulled in that E000 right at the end to go all over that white part of the veil. For the little top hat, I just colored the ribbon in the same green I used on the cake, and now I'm using some neutral grays to color in the hat. Now for the cake icing, I decided to make this a two-tone cake. So I'm using an E000 and an E00 to give it this kind of warm, off-white ivory look for the bottom underneath the heart and the buntings. And then for the top part, I'm using a light blue. And I just think that this is a really fun way to kind of make this cake look a little more exciting than just a traditional white wedding cake. I also think that this idea for this card would be great for any kind of occasion. You could just change up all the little supporting images with the porcupines and just make it a celebration for a baby or just a party or anything. I think that the possibilities are endless. Now for the cake stand, I did color this in gray, although after the fact I thought I should have colored it brown like it was a wooden cake stand, but I thought about that way later, so maybe if I do this again, I'll use the brown. For my little mushrooms, I'm just coloring in colors I've already used for the cake, so I have that pink and the green, and then I'll color that little one in purple, but I actually end up cutting that little one off, so you'll see that here in a bit. And then for the spots and the stems, instead of leaving them stark white, I like to use that really pale, that E000 for that. For my snail, for some reason, I always color them with a purple shell. So of course he's gonna have a purple shell as well, pulling in that purple that I just have little bits of. And then I use the coordinating dies to cut them out. I will be using some more images. I'll pull those in later, especially some mushrooms from the Oh Gnome stamp set. Now to work on my platform pop-up, I have that coffee table pattern paper with that wood grain, and I'm going to cut 2 of these base pieces for the platform pop-up. I am making sure that I turn it so that my wood grain is going vertically on the sides of the box that will be created. Now I wanted to make this look like a stump of a tree that's been cut off, so I wanted the top platform where all my pieces are going to sit to be a different color. So I have some pieces of speckled eggshell cardstock, and I'm just taking that die and I'm going to cut out this trapezoid shape where the little slit is. I cut 2 of those, and then I'm just trimming right on the score line, so I just end up with the shape that will be on the very top of the platform pop-up. And this is a really fun way to give it a different look than the outside of that platform pop-up. Now before I glue these together, I'm going to bump them together like they would be. I'm actually flipping them over, so we're looking at the back side, which I know is kind of hard to tell on the video. And I'm bumping these together like they'll be when the platform pop-up is popped up, putting a little piece of removable tape on the back to hold them together, and then I'm adding some detail. So I have a Copic marker here, and I'm just going to roughly make this big swirl as if we're looking at the rings of a tree if it was cut. So if we have a big tree stump and it's cut, and you can see all those rings of the tree on that lighter piece of wood that's on the inside. And I'm doing this very roughly. It is not perfect, kind of going back over it, making it look a little rougher, a little darker in some places. Then I'm actually going to grab a lighter brown and kind of trace a little more and kind of blend it out so it's not such a stark line. Make it look a little less perfect. And then before I finish up, I'm adding some ink blending. So that apricot ink, I think, is a perfect companion to kind of darken up this speckled eggshell cardstock. I know you've seen me do this before, but I just think it makes it look kind of cool. So I'm just adding that apricot around all the edges and kind of all over, and it just darkens it up a little bit and makes it not look quite so bright white. Now I can fold my platform pop-up piece on all the score lines that the die creates. I'm just doing one right now, and then I will glue that speckled eggshell piece with the swirl to the top. So I folded all the score lines on this one, and then I will add some adhesive to the back of one of my trapezoid shaped pieces. And then what I really want to make sure I do is line up the slot, and then everything else will line up perfectly. But that slot's pretty important because we need that opening for our little T pieces to fit through. Now I'm doing the same thing to the other side, just folding on all those score lines that the die creates. I like to reinforce especially those ones on the top. And then I will add some adhesive to the back of this other piece with the swirl. Line that up so that my slot lines up between the 2 pieces, and I have it open for my little T piece to fit through. And then you can see these are going to fit together just like this perfectly, which I think is so fun. Now I've pulled out the textured canvas cardstock. This is the green pack because I have a variety of greens to choose from. I've cut the little hill from the platform pop-up out of a darker green. I've cut 2 of the T pieces from some speckled eggshell cardstock. And what I'm going to do is just put my 1/8 inch double-sided tape along that T piece, pull off that liner paper, and then stick it to the back of the little hill. I did only do 2 of these because I will be doing something different for the center, so I don't need a 3rd T for the center. So for the center, I'm using the Secret Garden window, and I also have a piece of that green textured canvas cardstock. I picked a lighter color for this. I've trimmed down a piece so that I can cut my window, so I'm lining up that outside arch. Then I will line up the inside piece that will cut all the little greenery. And I'm actually going to tape these together to each other because I do end up cutting a second one. So here is that little arch that's going to go in the center, but since it is supporting itself just by itself, I thought it would be a good idea to cut a second one and layer them together. And since I have those two dies still taped together exactly in the same place, I can easily just cut a second one from that same green cardstock. And then I can layer these together and just make this arch a little bit more sturdy than one piece of paper. So I'm using some liquid glue, I'm tracing around that arch and just adding some little dots where the flowers and the leaves stick out. And then I'll just basically laminate these two pieces together, giving myself a thicker piece of cardstock for that arch. Now I do end up cutting some of those little flowers on the very bottom. You're gonna see me cut one off here in just a minute. I'm just looking to see what this is gonna look like. So I'm cutting off that little one that sticks up that just has the little sprigs with the circles, but I do actually end up cutting off that one that's on the right side as well a little later in the video. I decided I wanted to add some dimension to this by adding some inking to the edges so it's not just one stark green color. So I'm using some jalapeno ink and a little blending tool to just add some darker green along the outside edges. Now I am going to go ahead and assemble some of my pieces. So I have my little cake. This will go on one of the little hillsides. This is going to layer in the back of the platform pop-up. And then I'm also adding the little veil to this hedgehog that will go on the left side, and then the little top hat to the hedgehog on the right. Like I said, I think that this whole idea would be fun, not just for a wedding, but you could add party hats and make this a really fun party. And I think I might do that for another card in the future. Now I do have the little trio of mushrooms, and I'm putting this as my cake topper because this is a woodland wedding. But what I changed was I wanted it just to be 2 mushrooms. I decided I do like the 3, but I just thought it would look more like a traditional cake topper that has, you know, a bride and a groom at the top or whatever if I only had 2 mushrooms. So I cut off that little purple one, and then I'll just add the 2 mushrooms to the top. So this is going to layer in the back of my box. I'm folding along the score line on the T, but I can't put it in my box just yet because I haven't assembled it yet. So let's work on that. I did take a look at this before I glued it together and decided I wanted to add some shading at the bottom so it kind of looked like it went down into the ground versus just being all the same. So I'm just protecting along that fold line with a piece of post-it note tape, and I'm adding some walnut ink just to the bottom of the outside part of this box, and you can see there how that kind of gives it a different look. Now I'll add my double-sided tape to all the little tabs on the platform pop-up. And then I can start to assemble it. Now I did put my 2 pieces together first before I folded up the platform part, which is not how I usually do this, so I think I was just thinking through things a little backwards. So I put the 2 sides together, but now you see I'm going to flip this around and flip it over and then put my 2 platform pieces up. Usually I do this first before I put the 2 together. Just made it a little awkward, kind of a long piece I had to manipulate around, but you can see how that's going to work. So I folded those 2 up and made my little box. Now this is the back, so that's where my cake's going to go. So I will put my adhesive on the little tab, and then you want to make sure that the adhesive is facing your tabletop. Slide it in there and push it down and it will be correct. Now I can add my arch. Now this is going to be sandwiched in between the 2 pieces, just like this. So you're not going to see the bottom piece. The arch is just going to look like it comes from the left and the right, and you won't see the bottom part of the window. So that's why I decided to go ahead and cut off this other little leaf here. So I just have the leaves on the left and the right and none on the bottom. So I've put a line of liquid glue just on the bottom. I'm pushing this up so I can see that top edge, and I'm actually going to glue this just slightly below that edge so that it is going to be completely hidden between the 2 pieces. I do want to go ahead and add my other little hill and I want to make sure this is facing towards the front of the box. Again, my adhesive faces my tabletop, and then it will end up in the right place inside the box. So now that I have all those pieces assembled in there, I can add my adhesive to this rectangle, and these two pieces will line up together. So you just close it like a book, and then I'll finish it off by pulling the liner piece off this tape on this tab and finish off with that tab. So you can see there how we're starting to take shape, our little tree stump where our wedding is going to happen. Now I can add my little characters to that hill in the front, and the one thing you do want to make sure of is, since that veil kind of trails off to the left, you do just want to check it and make sure that it's not in the way of the box closing. So that's what I was doing there, was I was just closing the box to make sure that that veil did not stick out too far to the left. And that is also why I used some liquid glue, so I could pull it off and adjust it a little bit. I wanted them to be a little bit closer than I had started out with the one on the left. And you can see that that veil is gonna just miss the outside edge of the box when it closes. Now to do my sentiment, I have a wavy banner I've cut from some speckled eggshell cardstock, and I've just put the negative into my MISTI to hold my banner. That way I don't have to worry about a magnet or anything. And I also have a grip mat in there that's helping hold it. Then I can line up my stamp, pick it up with the door, and I can stamp it right down onto that wavy banner. Now I am going to put this sentiment on the front of the platform pop-up, but I think it would be really cute up at the top of the arch as well. I did want to make like a grassy hill around the bottom of my platform pop-up so that the stump looked like it went down to some grass, and I had a place to put some mushrooms and things. So I have some green watercolor wishes paper, and I'm actually using the Hillside Wraparound for the platform pop-up. I just cut a strip of this, 2 of them, and then I'm using a stitched hillside to cut the bottom, and I'm kind of making a custom wraparound that is a lot shorter. So I've cut one, and then what I'm doing is I'm lining up both sides and just marking with a pencil about where the hill would hit when it is assembled into a piece that goes all the way around in a circle. And you can see I kind of cut this one crooked at the top, but it really doesn't matter because I'm only concerned about the bottom. Then I'm using my pencil marks as a guide to kind of line this up, and it's not perfect, but it lines up pretty well. They both actually end up looking exactly the same, which is kind of funny. So I'm folding on the score lines that Hillside Wraparound die created. You could also do this without that Hillside Wraparound. It's just kind of convenient because it makes the score lines for you ahead of time. And then I will line that up, put a little adhesive on the tab, erase my pencil mark, and then do the same thing to the other side. So a little bit of adhesive on that tab, and then I can complete the piece that wraps around. And I did have like a little place where my tab was sticking up above my hill, so I'll just trim that off so that I don't have that little corner, and erase my pencil line on that side as well. And so now this will work just like a normal hillside wraparound. Is just not going to go up past the top edge. So I'm just going to wrap this around, tuck it on there, and you can see it gives me a hill across the bottom. Now before I glue that into place, I wanted to add the same sort of inking to the top just to give it some variation in color. So I'm using that same jalapeno ink and a little ink blending brush, and I'm just using this scrap piece of paper to go in between to protect the back side. And then I can put this back wrapped around. I'm pushing it up a little bit, and then I will add a little bit of liquid glue to hold it in place. I actually wish I had used not liquid glue because it almost glued it too much. It didn't move around when I laid it flat, so that's just a little tip. I think just a little bit of adhesive runner would have worked. Now I pulled out the gnome stamp set and stamped a bunch of mushrooms, and I also stamped these little pair of hearts from Happy Wedding to put at the top of the arch. I had originally stamped those wedding bells, but to me they felt too big with the other images I had, so I did not end up using those, and I think the hearts work really nicely. And then of course, Oh Gnome has like 3 different mushrooms, so I colored those in various colors. I think I cut out to each style, so I have 6. And I also have the little trio of mushrooms from the Porcupine for You set. I have this little guy who's also from Porcupine for You that I need to add. I had originally thought about adding some different woodland critters around, like the guests at the wedding, but they were a little big and a little much, and I actually really like how the mushrooms turned out. I'm adding some to the back here. I actually thought about putting this little snail on the mushroom or hiding him in the back, but I eventually decided to put him at the front with the other little porcupine so you could see him front and center, and then just use mushrooms across the back. So it looks like we have mushrooms all around our tree stump, and I just think that this is so cute. I also colored and cut out some of the larger leaves from the Porcupine for You set, and I wasn't sure where I wanted these. I thought about on the arch or on top of the stump, but I ended up just using them on the back to kind of fill in a little bit more around my mushrooms. And then, of course, it's not a wedding without some glitter. So I'm adding my stickle accents to the hearts and the veil, the top hat, the spots on the mushrooms. I'll add some to the mushrooms on the cake too. And then to kind of dress up the arch, I actually traced just the very top edge of the arch with the stickles and kind of pulled it down the sides a little bit. And I think that really helped dress up the arch a bit. And of course, I'm going to set this aside and not touch it until these stickles are dry. I want to make sure I don't flatten this out until they're dry. So once they're dry, they can flatten out, and then it pops up to this cute little wedding scene. I actually kind of wish I'd made a second cake and layered it on the back so it wasn't just blank, but I just think this is so cute with the tree stump idea. I just love how it turned out. And here's another look at my final wedding card, but I think this would be cute for babies, graduation, birthday parties. Any idea would be great with these cute little porcupines. I think the sky is the limit. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.